2017, the bull market in crypto, was retail. What's great is retail is already in this trade, and we're going to get to front run Wall Street. That never happens.
Prestigious investment banks boasted of trading desks the size of football fields. Now they're losing money on trading operations and laying off scores of traders.
There's a very famous anecdote out of Goldman Sachs where about 15 years ago they used to have about 500 human traders on a trading floor making markets in stocks. So basically connecting buyers and sellers using the telephone. And that's gone away, obviously with the rise of electronic. Now today they have 3 people.
Wall Street front runs the individual. This time the little guy gets his opportunity to front run Wall Street. How really monumental this shift is that's going on, because it's huge. And we can all make money from it, more importantly. The whole system is changing to this new internet of value. I think real estate will be tokenized.
Everything that can be tokenized will be tokenized. That Wall Street's cost in clearing securities and wire transfers and so forth is about $200 to $400 billion a year. When Wall Street really gets this, they'll realize that money is just being wasted and burned up.
Let me explain. So right now on 7 Mile Beach in the Cayman Islands is expensive apartments. The average citizen of the Cayman Islands can't afford to buy them. They're sold to Americans and some of the wealthy families here and Canadians and Brits and stuff. Now, you could tokenize it, which means you can have the recorded ownership, your fractional ownership that trades on an exchange. So I can sell my $5,000 investment in a $10 million condo to you instantaneously. What that means is you're a pension fund in the Cayman Islands looking after the general population. You can share in these projects that ordinary people couldn't do. So let's say you're a real estate developer. Well, you can now sell real estate, high-end real estate, to individuals. Because you're not selling one thing, you're not creating a REIT, you're creating something that's instantly tradable. It was kind of like timeshare was, but this is a real ownership, recorded ownership, that I own a share of the property that you've just built. And I can trade it with somebody else instantaneously for money. Look, there is a secular shift going on. I grew up in the UK, and there was a massive societal shift, much like we're seeing in the US now, back in about 79, 80, 81. And what happened was we lost the steel industry, the shipbuilding industry, the coal mining industry, and the tin mining industry all in one go. And that never came back. And guess what? It's pretty difficult to retrain a 55-year-old steel worker into the services economy, for example. So it creates structural, rigid unemployment for extended periods of time. And those cities took a long time to come back. Many of them never came back. So I think the same is true. I mean, realistically, shopping malls, that game's finished. There'll be some in certain routes, but it's not really going to be there. So I think there's a structural shift coming. And my guess is you'll end up buying shopping mall, knocking them down and building apartments. Because need apartments because this massive millennial population can't afford, there's not enough supply. They need to get into stuff. We need cheaper, high quality apartments for that huge population, because they're still having to live with their parents, they're still in the renter economy. There's a bunch of things that can be done. So my guess is we'll be ripping up shopping malls and changing them to other things. Now, in terms of office space, who knows? The jury's out. And in stores in, let's say, New York City, I think the jury's out. I think young people will find that there's lower rents and they can create their own businesses and they can start the entrepreneurial cycle again. You know, changing some awful chain store like Staples and turning it into an artisan bakers and somebody's in control of their own income, great. I think that's coming because rents will come down because the chain stores won't be there any longer. There is no point. But artisan stuff, yes. Shopping malls, no. And apartments, of course.
If you are looking into what to invest in the future, what trends do you see that people may not see yet? What do you see coming?
Look, I think this cryptocurrency trend overall is bigger than people can yet get their heads around.
And now with a large mega cap company getting listed, being publicly traded at probably more than $50 billion of market cap, the two worlds will collide and become intertwined. It's going to become clear that crypto is a giant asset class with $1 trillion, is very relevant.
It's currently The whole space is about a $1 trillion asset. My guess is we'll be talking about a $20 trillion asset plus in the next 10 years. So, okay, we don't get many of those opportunities. The other long forgotten one is emerging markets, because the US has dominated so much this last cycle that nobody invests in emerging markets anymore. India has a phenomenal demographic, high savings rate, low debts. It's completely the opposite of the US or Europe in terms of how it looks structurally. The probability of making money in India over the next 10 years, extremely high. And you know, if you look at the relative valuation of emerging markets, they're very cheap. So people have forgotten about these things, but my guess, if we come back in 5 years' time and have this conversation, everyone's going to be talking about the bets that they've got in India and some of these other big emerging market countries.
And then what about China?
China's more complicated. So A, it's got an aging population. B, it's got massive debt. But it kind of does know that it's got its structural problems with its banking system and the excess leverage, and they're trying to clear it out. So I don't know. It's not the one that I have a clear vision on. India, I've got clear opportunity. China, I don't know. It's a mix and match here. Maybe it's just Japan. We've had the peak, and it goes up and down with the business cycle for the next 30 years, which is what Japan did. It took a long time for Japan to change any of that excess debt dynamics.
So, final, this is my big question.
Go
If
for it.
they, you know, what Japan did was they started buying equities. Is the U.S. heading there?
Right now, they don't need to because equities are all-time high.
Right.
The Europeans do it. They don't need to because most of the pension system is in bonds. So the European society is bondholders. The US are equity holders. Equities are at all-time highs. The real reason to buy equities is you don't want to default on the pension obligations of the baby boomer generation, which is 76 million people. So if equities fall, let's say there's another catastrophe and equities fall 50% here and stay down, yes, I think they will, because you're going to rob all of the baby boomers of their retirement.
Final word on that. What do you see in the pension area for boomers? Because I'm the old guy here.
It's really serious because the pensions never made enough returns because of zero interest rates to pay what people think they're going to get to retire. And there's a big shock coming. So whether it's the state pension plans that are bankrupt or people's 401ks that just won't have enough money for them to retire. So they either stop spending, which is what I think is going to happen. So the whole US economy lowers like Japan did and Europe did, or we end up with a pension crisis as everybody has to sell out of their equities at the same time. So they've got money to spend on their bills as they retire. The expected future returns from the bond market is negative and the credit market is negative. So that leaves you with potentially real estate if you find the right bets. And it probably leaves you with emerging markets, which are positive, and cryptocurrency. So people are going to have to navigate, and this is again why we started Real Vision, is people have to understand this. We have to take control of our own finances now. We can't leave it to some other guy because they don't actually care if we don't have the money to retire.